I'll do it. Using the Death Note, I'll change the world. First, I wrote the names of the worst criminals I could think of, like I was cleaning up the world one name at a time, so that eventually no one will ever do anything evil again.
Good old cat and mouse game. The caveat being that it's a mouse with an appetite for cat. Two conflicting ideologies hurling themselves at each other in an incredible display of mental acuity and careful planning. These are the engines that keep this glorious machine running.
Kira. I will hunt you down wherever you're hiding, and I will eliminate you. I am justice.
Despite the intriguing premise, the introduction of Death Note is surprisingly boring. It is effective in quickly introducing the premise, but it does so in an inconsequential manner. Random gangbangers being killed does not engage the audience or provide stakes to the production. In this introduction, we hardly learn about our protagonist, Light Yagami. He's smart and he doesn't like assholes. Neat. They had an opportunity to provide the audience with a reason as to why Light doesn't believe in normal institutions to improve the world. Perhaps he was subject to some injustice that was never rectified. There is no context provided for why anything that happens is actually meaningful. The carefully constructed strategies that Light enacts are engaging and surprisingly friendly to the audience's suspension of disbelief. The strategies are elaborate, but explained thoroughly using resources and logic that are convincing for a person in Light's situation. The intricate web of ideas that Light strings together in order to hatch his plots is really fun and satisfying to watch play out. The foil to Light's brilliant plots is L's brilliant deductive reasoning. Every small bit of information that he's able to glean is presented to the audience as a theory, and then supported by evidence. The theories that he formulates are nearly always correct, but the way L gets to these conclusions are reasonable. The audience is not left wondering how L came to the correct conclusion. To make matters more complicated and fascinating to behold, both Light and L employ an eye of the hurricane philosophy. They get as close to their enemy as possible under the assumption that being closer to the enemy is actually safer and more conducive to their respective goals than keeping their distance. Where a majority of the combat takes place psychologically, they do make an effort to vent their frustrations physically from time to time.
Do you think that I'm actually capable of becoming a murderer, Kira? Even after I help you catch him, do I seem like that kind of person to you?
Yes, you do. I've always thought so.
Death Note utilizes montages to signify the passage of time and to detail Light's two-faced nature in a way that is more tangible to the audience. It is somewhat easy to forget that everyone else sees Light as a nice dude when the audience gets to hear the sinister content of his thoughts. Death Note establishes the rules of its universe and then tells its story within that framework. Unless the mythical Season 2 actually exists, some of the interactions in Death Note are legitimately funny, but they are concentrated in smaller parts of the series. It's like they intended to make the production funny all along, and then remembered for only one episode.
I would never dream about living in a world without light.
Yes, that would be dark.
Death Note inhabits a dangerous facet of the anime industry, dependent on the strengths and weaknesses of its protagonist to drive the story. Light Yagami is an extraordinary character in that he is convincingly two-faced. He's able to fool nearly everyone into believing that he is a model student with nothing but the purest of intentions. Under the surface, he is rotten to the core, obsessed with his own ambitions to the point of warping his principles in order to convince himself that what he is doing is just. This is where the true brilliance of Death Note lies. The audience is shown Light's slow descent into corruption and insanity through his thoughts and conversations with Ryuk. The aggressiveness displayed by Light is brilliant. It is disguised by the cerebral nature of the production, but it drives the story forward at a blazing pace. Most people would probably just hang low and exercise caution if they find out that a policing agency is suspecting them. Light, on the other hand, cannot stand being challenged or stalled. He always takes aggressive action in the face of a challenge. He would use a sledgehammer to kill a fly. Despite being bitter enemies, Light and L bring out the best in each other through their interactions. Light needs someone as smart as him. He needs an adversary that can take a hit from his sledgehammer and get back up to keep fighting. His incredible planning and self-control is a result of the existence of L. L is not used to having his authority or ideas questioned. His brilliance prevents him from making human relationships, and Light's overwhelming competence as a villain forces him to rely on other people in order to stay competitive. He also had never come into contact with someone that could operate on the same intellectual level as him. He finds comfort in the fact that someone else can come to the same conclusions given the same information. Ryuk is the only consistent source of comedic content despite his appearance. He is primarily used to dump exposition through conversation with Light, however he serves an additional purpose. Ryuk personifies Light's perverse mindset, taking full advantage of being invisible to other people. Misa Amane ranges from unimportant to annoying, but she does help to flesh out Light Yagami's character. She allows an opportunity for Light to show how he uses people that are close to him for his own benefit. It highlights his narcissism and lack of human empathy as he deteriorates throughout the course of the production. Unfortunately, they failed to establish a sense of community between the largely irrelevant side characters. If the side characters were engaging, then there would have been an additional tension because the audience would have wanted them to survive and win. It would have been nice if there had been tangible bonds between Light and the rest of the task force so that the reality of Light's betrayal would have been more bitter. There is a lack of a real relationship between Light and his father. Light is constantly lying to his father and breaking everything that his father has spent his career building. Why is there no dramatic confrontation? Because the side characters are so inconsequential, it makes the drama only impactful based on what happens rather than how it affects the cast. Where these failures in development don't necessarily degrade the production, they do prevent it from being as good as it could have been. Both the English and Japanese dubs are good, but not excellent. On one hand, Mamoru Miyano's Light Yagami is really excellent. His natural undulating style of starting to orate low before getting big is very well suited to Light's two-faced nature. He is also really effective when it comes to getting big and overacting, which is a compliment to the musical score and cinematography. Brad Swale, on the other hand, is not good at portraying evil intent. He is very good when it comes to good Light, but frankly that's the boring Light. Ryuk is good in Japanese, but awesome in English. Brian Drummond brings his fun and unhinged aspect to Ryuk, complete with some excellently coordinated comedic timing. Alessandro Giuliani's L is much more introspective, almost to the point of mumbling to himself, which is a nice touch since it gives him an air of not being used to voicing his thoughts. He also gives off a Sherlock Holmes appeal that is missing the Japanese dub, where he more or less just sounds quirky and monotonous. A failure of both dubs is that neither of them are able to exfoliate the relationship between Light and L. And before anyone asks, yes, I am aware that this has like 15 different dubs. No, none of them compete with the English and Japanese dubs. Though I will say that the Portuguese police sound pretty sweet. The music has an active and cerebral feel to it, which is atypical for animated productions. There is a huge variation in musical instrumentation, but it flows together as being part of the same body of work. A lot of this has to do with the fast tempo that the tracks tend to have. The OPs and EDs have an interesting relationship in that they could be interchanged and effectively serve the same purpose. This is contrary to mainstream theory, but it is effective nonetheless. The first set showcases the cerebral, exciting, and paranoid nature of the series. The second set highlights Light's escalating isolation, features an exaggerated emphasis on the loss of humanity and near schizophrenic visuals. The weakness of having your OPs and EDs accomplish similar purposes manifests itself when watching the OP right after the ED. It feels like you're listening to the same thing you just got finished with. For this reason I wouldn't normally give them a point, but I'll be nice since they do effectively convey a theme and are good listening material. The musical score is amazing at bringing to life generally uninteresting sequences. Slowly walking out of a building where police officers are shining really bright lights is not that interesting, but you wouldn't know it from this track.
Make sure there are no gaps. Do not reveal your faces. We know that Kira is not in the building. He is outside.
Yummy. Not only does the musical score make the uninteresting moments interesting, it also accentuates the exciting revelations.
What is this? A blackout?
For the content of Death Note, you wouldn't expect it to be nearly as exciting or decadent in presentation as it is. Where the characters might not mesh as well as they could have, the creative cinematography, vocal delivery, and music combine to make some ingenious content.
I'll solve equations with my right hand and write names with my left. I'll take a potato chip and eat it!
The OP has some great imagery, and the apple signifying the temptation and power that the Death Note offers. It displays the psychological tightrope that Light is walking in his quest for ultimate power, which is a nice touch since the danger and difficulty of what he's attempting can easily be diluted and lost over the course of the production. They made a real effort to make the visuals as interesting as possible through peripherals such as lighting and cinematography. The majority of the content is people talking, sitting, and walking around. It's really admirable how engaging the visuals are given the subject material. The screen is constantly moving in odd directions and presenting the material from odd angles. Differentiating hours of the day allows the creative staff to overemphasize shadows and add to the mood of the scenes. A majority of the sequences take place at night or in the afternoon when the shadows are more pronounced. Weather is underutilized and over-effective. There are some really cool uses of weather to enrich the scene composition, and I wish that they found more ways to fit it in. The striking cinematography cannot be understated for this production. The character designs range from average and gritty to pretty awful. This is especially apparent in episodes where corners were obviously cut. Death Note is an achievement in direction, brought to you by Tetsuo Araki, where the peripheral elements fit together splendidly. It earns itself an 8 out of 10. Yo guy, why aren't you reviewing the second season? What does that even mean? There's just like one season of 35 episodes, right? Nah, first season is up until the only spoiler that matters. As for why I'm not reviewing season 2, that's because it's